one more basketball season? Or should Athletics Director John Cohen go ahead and pull the plug right now? We dive in to the jungle on Scarbo Knows next. I know it sounds crazy, doesn't it? Discussion of changing coaches after 1 year when the coach actually has a winning record, which Stephen Pearl does in his first year as the head coach at Auburn. But there are people asking. There are people wondering. There are people doubting, a lot of people doubting, a lot of them faithful Auburn fans who are not convinced that Stephen Pearl is going to get the job done, to do the job that he was given in large part because he was the top assistant to his father, Bruce Pearl, who spent 11 years and remade Auburn basketball, gave Auburn the greatest run in its history. Is that run done? Is Stephen presiding over the decline and fall of Auburn basketball? That's what we're here to discuss today. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo. If I'm a little scratchy, I spent last week hosting on Alabama Public Television the Alabama State High School Basketball Championships. Great event. 42 games, boys and girls, back and forth. 6 days, 14 state championships decided, semifinals and finals. There's no event like it anywhere in the country. If you love high school basketball, you should come to Birmingham one year and check it out. And now let's say thank you as we get into it here to our sponsor, Money Management Services, the Rice family. They've been in business for, well, a long time. Since 1992, any financial needs you might have, they can help you with. They've been good friends of mine, and they will take great care of you. We'll hear from them later in the show, so you want to stick around for that. So let's get into what is happening at Auburn. Such a promising season as it started out. It's not all bad. A lot of good things have happened to get Auburn to this point where everybody's talking about Auburn. Auburn is going to be that team on Selection Sunday, which is only 6 days away, that everybody's talking about, whether they get in, whether they don't get in. They're going to be a hot topic. And there's a reason for that, because they've done a lot of good things in year one under Stephen Pearl. They beat the SEC champion Florida, which looks like it's going to be a 1 seed, and they did it in Gainesville, where Auburn had not won in 30 years. They beat the Big East champ, another power conference in St. John's. They did that on a neutral floor. They beat the team that will be the number 3 seed in the SEC tournament in Arkansas. They split with the Razorbacks. Each won their games at home. They played, according to Ken Pom, the second toughest schedule in the country. And Stephen Pearl, with 0 head coaching experience, beat 3 coaches with national championships on their resumes. Todd Golden at Florida, John Calipari of Arkansas, and Rick Pitino of St. John's. Those are all positives. Those are all things that your typical first-year head coach does not do. And Stephen accomplished all of those things. The problem is he accomplished all of those things early. And when it went bad, it went really bad. When it went downhill, it was like watching the Olympic downhill. He got to the bottom very, very quickly. Let's look at some of the lowlights. We just looked at some of the highlights of this first year. Let's look at some of the lowlights. And no, it is not a coincidence that I put a picture of Keyshawn Hall on the page of the lowlights. Of course, Auburn got swept by Alabama. The Tide completed the IBOB double on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. And if you watch the game, you know the 96-84 final score, that was not indicative of the way the game was played. Alabama took the game by the throat early. Auburn made the final score respectable, but they were never truly in the game. And so that means Auburn closed the regular season by losing 8 of its last 10 games. And the Tigers need to be very happy that the selection committee no longer emphasizes your last 10 or 12 games. That used to be the case some years ago, but they no longer do that. And we have talked at the Birmingham Tip-Off Club to Martin Newton, who's the vice chair of the selection committee this year, to Dr. Charles McClelland. He's a past chairman of the selection committee. And they emphasized that the games in November count just as much as the games in February and March. So if Auburn gets in and you point to that statistic as a reason they shouldn't have got in, remember, every game counts. And so the wins over Florida and St. John's, those are very, very important. But in terms of the status of Auburn basketball, this was the worst SEC record in 5 years at 7-11, the worst overall record in 5 years at 16-15, and among the worst in the last 10 years, as they were going to Final Fours, which they had never done. They went to 2 since 2019. They were winning SEC championships with Bruce Pearl in charge, won 5 of those, split between regular season and tournament. And they've been to the last 4 NCAA tournaments, which means if they do get in the field this year, they tie the school record of 5 in a row. That was set by Sonny Smith and company from 1984 through 1988, when Auburn had never been to the NCAA tournament before that. But Charles Barkley helped get him there. Chuck Person was along for the ride. He helped get him to the Elite Eight in 1986. Chris Morris came along. Great run of Auburn talent. Great run of Auburn teams. But that was the one and only time Auburn got to 5 straight NCAAs. They have a chance to match that this year, but they are firmly on the bubble. And so you look at all of those things, and then this has really jumped out at me. Of course, the SEC tournament starts Wednesday in Nashville. A year ago, Auburn won the SEC regular season championship, which meant they were the 1 seed in Nashville. They will go there this year as the number 12 seed. That drop in 1 year's time from number 1 to number 12 is the largest of any SEC team since LSU won the regular season in 2009 under Trent Johnson, and the very next year, they were the 12 seed. Not a precedent you want to duplicate. And yet, here we are. That's what Auburn has done in year 1 under Stephen Pearl. So some of you might be wondering, how does Stephen Pearl's first year as the Auburn coach compare to Bruce Pearl's first year as the Auburn coach back in 2014, 2015? So let's look at Bruce Pearl versus Mini Pearl, if you like. Bruce didn't have such a great year himself in his first year on the Plains. They went 15-20 overall. They were 4-14 in the SEC during the regular season. They lost 8 of their last 9 regular season games, and we'll save that last line for a moment. And Stephen, as we've already said, 16-15, 7-11, lost 8 of their last 10 regular season games. But where we really got the first evidence that Bruce Pearl was going to turn Auburn around, that he was going to lift up that program, was in that first SEC tournament that he coached the Tigers in 2015. Auburn was the 12th seed. They had won 4 games in 2 months in the SEC. But in 3 consecutive days, in a span of about 48 hours, they beat 3 teams in a row, 3 higher-ranked seeds. I think it was Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and LSU, to get to the semifinals. Now, the run ended there rudely against Kentucky when Calipari had still had things rolling there. But for Auburn, which only once in its history to that point had won 3 games in a single SEC tournament, to win 3 with that team, led by, well, one of the most memorable players in Auburn history, KT Harrell, lifted that team, carried that team, got them to the semifinals. That reminded people of how good a coach Bruce Pearl was, because he didn't inherit much when he got there. We know the wreckage that was left from the Jeff Lebo and Tony Barbee eras, and they didn't really get much done in the regular season in year 1 under Bruce Pearl. But when they got to tournament time, he worked his magic, and they got to the semifinals. So Stephen, of course, is going to be compared to his father at every turn. Can he make that kind of a run this week in Nashville? Can Keyshawn Hall, who has been, let's be honest, folks, a disappointment. Not as a scorer, but in every other aspect of his game. I would love to hear Andy Kennedy from UAB. Well, Andy might not want to coach Keyshawn Hall, but if he had, because Andy Kennedy's the best post-game quote in the business. He was talking about his best player the other day, Chance Westry, and he said, Chance is great at distributing the ball. He's had 4 or more assists in, 11, 12 straight games. Was a player of the week in the American Conference this last week of the regular season. And Andy, after the last game on Sunday, UAB won a home game, which was rare for them this year. They won all of their road games in the league. Another bizarre statistic. He said, Chance can't do this. He's terrible in every other aspect of his game. He runs up and down the floor 2 or 3 times. He looks like he's going to have a coronary or a stroke. And yet, you look up and he's making plays. Keyshawn Hall, for all the numbers he put up, and he was voted 3rd team All-SEC by the league's coaches. Those awards came out today. Keyshawn Hall's offensive efficiency declined over the second half of the season. We all remember he got benched for the last 12 minutes or so of the Vanderbilt loss. Then he got suspended for the next game at Arkansas, which Auburn lost. And it started to come clear why in his 3 previous stops the last 3 years, while Keyshawn Hall put up numbers, each of the teams he played on did not make the NCAA tournament. And someone did a review and noticed that the year after Keyshawn Hall left each of his previous schools, they had a better record the year after he left than the year he played. That's pretty strong evidence that as talented as he is, he's not a great team player. And I think if you want to examine what's gone wrong with this Auburn team, we talk about chemistry a lot, team chemistry. Well, their team chemistry is the kind that if you drop the match, it might explode. Think back to your high school chemistry experiments. Or my son Cannon, his experiments in his bathroom sink when he was growing up. He's now an aerospace engineer major at University of Florida. So very proud of him. Those experiments paid off. But the chemistry on this Auburn team, not good. The players don't necessarily like each other. They don't necessarily like the coach. They don't get along very well. In fact, I'm going to share something with you that I learned recently. And this comes from a firsthand source who heard the words with his own ears in a private conversation. And one of the players on this Auburn team, early in the year, very early in the year, before they hit some of the high notes and long before they went on this long slide, said, we didn't sign up for this. We signed up to play for Bruce Pearl. And therein lies the problem. We've talked about this before. Any criticism you want to give Stephen Pearl for the way this season has gone, and he certainly deserves his share. He is the head coach. He runs the practices. He decides on the lineups. He makes the substitutions. He sets the rotations. So yes, he deserves a lion's share, or at least a large bulk of the responsibility for Auburn's slide to 16-15 and 7-11 in the SEC. But he's not the only one in the family who deserves plenty of blame for the season that started with such promise and has gone horribly wrong. And of course, the other person in this equation is Bruce Pearl. Because Bruce Pearl, retiring when he did, they announced it the day practice began. Not only did he lock in John Cohen, the AD, and give him no other choice but to promote Stephen as head coach. You can't conduct a national search at the end of September in college basketball. But he also locked in the roster. While technically those guys had 30 days to enter the transfer portal, where were they going to go? What other comparable basketball program had openings on its roster at that point in time? So you lock in the roster, you lock in your son as the head coach, The schedule was already set under Bruce Pearl, whether he was the one making the phone calls, arranging all the non-conference games or not. He was the head coach when it happened. So he bears a lot of responsibility. And it would be nice, while he's popping off about Miami of Ohio, although now he has shockingly changed his mind and his tune and decided that, you know what, Miami of Ohio might be pretty good. They're undefeated. They had an undefeated regular season, 31-0. Only two handfuls of teams have done that in the history of college basketball, have gotten to 31-0. And while he was arguing, a week or so ago, that if Miami of Ohio loses in its conference tournament and does not gain the max automatic bid and thus needs an at-large bid to get into the dance, and maybe possibly they're compared with Auburn, Bruce naturally is making a case for Auburn and his son. He even admitted in a podcast with, I'm not going to mention the outlet. I'm not going to mention the former coach, because there's a good reason that guy's a former coach and that he works for that outlet. But in that podcast, Bruce Pearl admitted, did he help his son get the job? Nepotism? You bet I did. That is close to a direct quote. So, yes, but not like we needed to hear him say it to know it, but he admitted it. So now he's changed the tune. Now he's on the Miami of Ohio bandwagon. He wants to see Akron get in too. He wants to see two MAC teams get in. He read the room, and he changed his tune. But it would be nice, and his son certainly would deserve it, if Bruce would take some responsibility for what has happened at Auburn. I have yet to hear him do that. I doubt that we will. So, where are we on Stephen Pearl? Look, he's got a 5-year contract. 5 years. I'm not sure why he has a 5-year contract, but that's what he was given, about $5 million a year. So it would be financially foolish to fire him right now for one reason. Secondly, this is not fully his team and is not fully his schedule. So I think, despite what I'm hearing from a number of Auburn supporters who are telling me they're ready to cut ties now, I think Stephen deserves at least next year to see if he could do this job the way it should be done. I think he deserves next year with his roster and his schedule, and put all the responsibility on his shoulders for how the season turns out. I think it's only fair, because we talk about Stephen from a nepotism aspect, but he was the top assistant to a program that became one of the better programs in the country. He wasn't just there picking up towels. He wasn't just there handing the whiteboard to his dad during timeouts. He was, as Bruce Pearl told us many times, the defensive coordinator. Now, I know some of you are chuckling when you hear that, because Auburn's defense this year has been non-existent, especially on the perimeter, where team after team, week after week, game after game, somebody hits a season high in their three-point percentage. Josh Hubbard goes off for 46 from Mississippi State, and Auburn loses a really bad loss in Starkville. And guess who they get to play in the first round of the SEC tournament? Josh Hubbard and Mississippi State. Although, I think from what I've heard from my sources, State's pretty much thrown in the towel. We'll see how much energy and enthusiasm they have when they get to Nashville. But Stephen deserves another year, and I think he's going to get it. I think it would be a shocker if John Cohen made a move. Now, the downside, if John Cohen wanted to make a move, did make a move, would be that John Cohen would be the one hiring the next coach, because his track record at Auburn, well, let's see, in the two biggest sports, the sports that matter the most to the bottom line, financially, emotionally to the Auburn family, football and men's basketball, his first football hire didn't turn out so well. Hugh Freeze, 3 years, no winning seasons, 0-3 in the Iron Bowl, and now they're going to pay him, or they are paying him, somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million to go away. We'll see if Alex Golish is a better hire, if he has more success on the Plains. And then his basketball hire, John Cohen's that is, who we didn't really have a choice, as we said, but it's on his watch, has a losing record in the SEC, is winless in the Iron Bowl of basketball, and is one game over 500 overall. So if you're an Auburn person, even if you're opposed to Stephen Pearl continuing, do you want John Cohen to hire another coach in another major sport at Auburn? I would think many of you would say no to that. I don't think that's the best thing for Auburn either, because, well, I've known John a long time. I remember him back in his days as the Mississippi State baseball coach. He has not overall had a great deal of success as the athletics director at Auburn. I could get into more detail, but that's another subject for another day. So another way we can compare Stephen Pearl this year is to the other first-year coaches in the SEC. There were three of them. Sean Miller, of course, at Texas, and then our favorite, Bucky McMillan from Texas A&M. And as you know, I am not neutral on this subject. I have known Bucky since he was a player at Birmingham Southern, followed him through his coaching days at Mountain Brook High School, and then one of the smartest hires ever when Martin Newton at Samford knew that Bucky's success in high school would translate to college, hired him at Samford. He was wildly successful there, and that's why he got the job at Texas A&M. And guess who has had the best season to date of any of the three first-year coaches in the SEC? It's Bucky McMillan. The Aggies are 21-10 overall, 11-7 in the league. They tied for fourth place, but based on the tiebreakers, they will be the number 6 seed in Nashville at the SEC tournament. Sean Miller at Texas, they had a nice run 2/3 of the way or so through the SEC season. They've fallen off the last week or two. They're 18-13, 9-9. They'll be the number 10 seed in the conference tournament. And then coming in third in this 3-horse race is Stephen Pearl at Auburn. The worst overall record of the three at 16-15, the worst conference record of the three at 7-11, and they'll be the number 12 seed, as we mentioned earlier. And we should say Bucky McMillan split his games with Sean Miller. He won the only head-to-head with Stephen Pearl in a thriller. Last-second three-pointer by Keyshawn Murphy for Auburn came just after the buzzer. We went into that in detail earlier in the season. There was no controversy. They got it right, whether you like it or not, Auburn fans. But Stephen Pearl and Auburn did beat Sean Miller in Texas. That was their last significant win. That was one of the 2 wins that Auburn had in its last 10 regular season games. So what are we thinking about the SEC tournament? What has to go on there? What does Auburn have to do to make sure it gets to the NCAA tournament? Is it going to be chalk in Nashville? Are we going to see the Florida Gators do what they've done throughout the regular season since that inexplicable home loss to Auburn, which Stephen Pearl is riding until that horse can't stand any longer? As well he should. Look, if you're upset that Stephen Pearl has been lobbying for his team and emphasizing the win over Florida, the win over St. John's, the win over Arkansas, the second toughest schedule in the country, according to Ken Palm, isn't that what coaches are supposed to do? To lobby for their teams? To emphasize the positive on their resumes? Of course. It's what he's doing. It's what he should do. But what he needs to do is go to Nashville, win some games. Let's look at the SEC tournament bracket. It should be fun up in Bridgestone Arena this year. Now, you see the teams in the larger type. Those are my predictions for the week. Of course, it won't go this way. There are always surprises. Kentucky, Mark Pope's got his own issues. Not sure how long he is for that job. We talked about him on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. I think they'll get one. How about Kentucky playing on the first day in the first game of the SEC tournament? That has never happened before. And it has Kentucky fans very, very divided on whether Mark Pope should continue as head coach. He probably will get at least one more year. I think they get one more victory, but I think that's it. But Auburn's bracket, like I said, they have to figure out a way to keep Josh Hubbard from going off for another 46 points. What, he scored 30 in the first half when they met in Starkville. Can Auburn, for the first time in memory, play some type of defense on the perimeter? Maybe, how about a box and one, triangle and two, something. Try something. Try anything. Try an amoeba defense. Try something to keep Josh Hubbard from going off. I think they will. I think Auburn will find enough because, as I said, State has kind of mailed it in down the stretch with the exception of the Auburn game. So I think Auburn can get that one, but I think that's as far as they go. I think they need one more. I think they have got to – they will play Tennessee if they win their first game. They lost to the Vols in Knoxville. I think they've got to win that one. I think 2 wins at the minimum for Auburn puts them in good shape for Selection Sunday. And you can see the rest of the bracket. I like Florida and Tennessee to meet in the semifinals along with Alabama and Texas A&M. But nobody's stopping Florida. Florida may not lose again. Not in Nashville in the SEC tournament and not wherever they send them in the NCAA tournament. I'm telling you right now, I don't know the bracket. I haven't seen the NCAA tournament bracket. Neither have you. No one has. It's not done yet. But wherever they send them, whoever they match them up with, I'm telling you right now, Florida is my pick to go back-to-back as national champions. They are that good. Look at the SEC awards that came out today. Todd Golden, Coach of the Year. Thomas Houck, first-team All-SEC. Ruben Chinyelu, second-team All-SEC. Alex Condon, third-team SEC. Urban Klazar, sixth man of the year. Ruben Chinyelu, defensive player of the year, and scholar athlete of the year. And I can tell you what, talk to Ruben and Alex and Houck back at SEC Media Days before the season began here in Birmingham, and they all were so much fun to talk to. But Ruben one day could be a prime minister. Ruben could be whatever he wants to be. He's got a long basketball career ahead of him in the NBA. I thought he should have been first-team SEC. But I'll also say this. Look, Todd Golden did a great job. But you're the most talented roster in the league. You were picked to finish first, and you finished first. That's not easy. I'm not downplaying that accomplishment. But when you look at Texas A&M, Bucky McMillan was the last power conference head coach hired 2 weeks after the transfer portal had opened. So the pick of the litter was already gone. They were picked to finish 13th in the league. They tied for 4th. Now, again, as I said, I am not neutral when it comes to Bucky McMillan. I've seen people doubt him for a long time, and I've seen him prove people wrong for a long time. That's why I think he should have been Coach of the Year. Won't break his heart. He'll probably go to Nashville and win a few games. So what about Auburn in terms of the NCAA bubble where they firmly sit today? Let's look at some of these metrics. Now, some of you may already know this, and some of you may not. So let me let you know. And again, this is from my relationship with several selection committee members, including Greg Byrne from Alabama, the athletic director there. He's also on the selection committee. He wasn't able to join us for our roundtable this year. He has the last couple of years. So there are 7 metrics that are included on each team's team sheet when that selection committee gets to Indianapolis and they start deliberating. And these are all the metrics: basketball power index, net, the Ken Pom ranking, the strength of record. WAB is wins above bubble. That means where you rank in terms of what a regular bubble team would do with your schedule. Then there's KPI, and there's the T rank. Bart Torvik puts that out. And all of those metrics, Auburn is better in some, 29 in BPI. It's pretty strong. Net, 38. Ken Pom, 39. Once you get into the 40s, gets a little dicey. That WAB at 45 makes me a little nervous for Auburn's NCAA tournament chances. Now, Joe Lenardi, who's been actually taking a lot of shots, because people are saying he has fallen off as a bracketologist in terms of his success rate. He has Auburn right now, as we speak, as the last team in the field. To contrast with that, there is the bracket matrix, which compiles a whole lot of brackets, 79 of them you see. Auburn is only included in the field in 16 of those 79 brackets at the moment. This is all subject to change. And let me add this. We hear the words eye test a lot when we talk about college football, and we talk about the selection committee there and the process of choosing the at-large teams for the 12-team college football playoff. The basketball selection committee intentionally does not use the words eye test. Let me repeat that. They intentionally do not use the words eye test. You will not hear any member of that selection committee use those words. However, having said that, they all watch a lot of basketball games. They all are assigned, I think it's 3 conferences each, to monitor throughout the year to make sure they are as informed as possible about the teams that are under consideration from those leagues. And I can't tell you how many basketball games each of those committee members watches throughout the season. So they are very well informed, not only from an analytic perspective in terms of all of these metrics, but they know what they see. There is an eye test element involved in it, even if they don't use the words. So it is very difficult to compare Auburn, say, to a St. Louis or an Indiana or an SMU, a Stanford, a Cal. And Auburn has better wins than most of the teams that it is competing with on the bubble. It also has a lot more losses because it's played a tougher schedule. How do you judge that? How do you measure that? How do you weigh that? That's why they have, 12 or 13 people on the selection committee, because each member of that selection committee will weigh those metrics differently. And they will have a meeting of the minds, and then you'll have your 68-team field on Sunday starting about 5 o'clock Central Time, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. So what's the bottom line here? I know there are Auburn fans out there. I know some of you would like to see Stephen Pearl move on. I think some of you would like a fresh start. What you've seen this year convinces you that he's not the man for the job. You don't like the way he got the job. You don't like the role his dad played in it. And as much as you appreciate and respect the job that Bruce Pearl did with Stephen Pearl's assistance, you think it's time for the Pearl family to move on, to continue to support Auburn basketball, but get a new head coach in there who was not sired by Bruce Pearl. I understand your feelings. I understand your frustration, especially over this last month of the year, as Auburn has continued to struggle, as Keyshawn Hall has continued to demonstrate that he is not a team leader, and that this team is the opposite of last year's team, which had maybe the greatest team chemistry of any basketball team I've ever been around. Certainly they're on the short list with Janai Broome and Dylan Cardwell, the greatest teammate ever. Auburn man extraordinaire. He will be revered in Auburn history. And yet his stats won't measure up, other than wins. He had the most wins of any player in Auburn history. His other stats don't measure up to the Charles Barkleys, the Chuck Persons, the Chris Morrises. And we can go on and on. The Chris Porters, Wesley Flanagans, etc. Great chemistry last year, horrible chemistry this year, which is why Auburn sits where it sits. But Stephen Pearl should get another year as the head coach. I fully believe Stephen Pearl will get another year as the head coach. So John Cohen, whether he likes it or not, he really doesn't have a choice, is going to ride or die with Stephen Pearl. And if next year goes wrong as this year did, I fully believe that a year from now, we'll be discussing who might be the next coach of the Auburn basketball program. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on Scarbo Knows. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. Appreciate you watching. Thank you to Brendan Martin, the extraordinary executive producer here on the Sidelines.live network. Make sure you check out all the great shows on the network. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. Don't cost nothing, but it helps us out, and we appreciate it. All right, make sure you stick around now for a word from our sponsor, Money Management Services, and that's going to do it for me. Have a great day, everybody. See you.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.